The small, quiet town of Crestwood was a peaceful place, nestled in the hills where the green trees swayed gently in the wind, and the birds chirped from the branches. People walked down the streets without fear, their everyday lives moving along in harmony. But this peace was about to be shattered in the most unexpected way. It was early morning when a strange occurrence took place. A loud hum filled the air, the kind that seemed to vibrate the very earth beneath. The townspeople looked up, puzzled and curious, their eyes scanning the sky. It was a sound unlike anything they had ever heard, and it seemed to come from nowhere, yet it grew louder and louder. Suddenly, there was a flash, a blinding light that came from the sky. It wasn't the sun, it was something else, something unnatural. At first, they thought it might be a plane. But no, this was different. The light grew brighter, blinding in its intensity, and before anyone could react, something descended from the heavens. A ship, sleek, metallic, and alien in its design, broke through the clouds, its surface reflecting the light like a mirror. It hovered silently above the ground, casting a long shadow over the town. The people below stood frozen in shock and fear. The ship hovered for what felt like an eternity, its purpose unknown. Then, without warning, a beam of light shot down, cutting through the air like a knife. It swept across the ground, landing directly on the figure of a young girl. Her name was Emily, a 7-year-old child with bright eyes and an innocent smile. She had been playing in the yard, chasing a butterfly, unaware that her world was about to change forever. The beam wrapped around her, lifting her off the ground, her small body glowing in the light. She gasped, her arms flailing as she tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her feet left the earth, and she was pulled toward the ship, her tiny frame rising higher and higher, her feet now dangling in the air. Her mother, Anne, who had been inside the house making breakfast, heard her daughter's terrified cries. She rushed outside, her heart racing, only to be met with the sight of her daughter vanishing into the sky. "Emily!" she screamed, her voice filled with panic and disbelief. She reached out, but it was no use. The beam pulled Emily higher, and within seconds, she was swallowed by the ship above, disappearing into the unknown. Anne dropped to her knees in shock, her hands trembling as she stared at the empty sky. The people of Crestwood were frozen, too stunned to move, too terrified to react. They could only watch as the alien ship hovered for a few moments longer before slowly rising higher into the sky and disappearing into the clouds, leaving nothing behind but a heavy silence. The news spread like wildfire. The authorities scrambled, the military was alerted, but no one had answers. Was it a freak accident, or something far more sinister? A child had been taken, abducted right from the ground in front of countless witnesses, and no one knew who or what was responsible. But the truth was far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The child, Emily, was not just an innocent victim of a strange event. She was part of something much bigger. The aliens who had watched Earth from afar had been studying humanity for years. They had observed the way humans interacted with their environment, the way they built societies and cultures. But it was something else entirely that had caught their attention: humanity's potential for survival, its strength in adversity. The Xarlor, the alien race responsible for the abduction, were a powerful species, known for their advanced technology and ruthless nature. They had conquered countless planets, each one falling easily to their superior weapons and tactics. They had never encountered a species like humanity before, one so unpredictable, so fierce when pushed to the edge. They had assumed Earth would be no different. But they made a fatal mistake. The Xarlor believed that taking the human child would be nothing more than a simple experiment. The child would be studied, analyzed, and used to learn more about human physiology, psychology, and biology. But they did not understand what that action would set in motion. They didn't realize that the child they had taken was not just any ordinary human. Emily was connected to something far more dangerous than they could ever comprehend. Emily's family was no ordinary family. Her father, Marcus, had been part of an elite military unit, one hidden from the public eye, working in secret to protect Earth from threats beyond our understanding. For years, Marcus and his team had prepared for an event like this, training in secret, gathering resources, and learning how to fight against forces that humanity had never before encountered. They were humanity's last line of defense, a force so secretive that even most governments didn't know they existed. When Emily was taken, Marcus didn't hesitate. He had known this day might come. He had known that the Carler, or others like them, might one day turn their eyes toward Earth. His family had been preparing for years, knowing that their hidden war could be one that changed the future of humanity. The moment Emily vanished, Marcus activated a silent alert. A signal was sent across the globe, reaching only a select few, those who knew how to respond. The countdown began. The response was swift, silent, and precise. Teams of highly trained operatives, equipped with cutting-edge technology, began moving into position. They knew the stakes. They knew that the Xarlar had made a grave error, and they knew that humanity would not let this go unanswered. But the Xarlar had already underestimated humans. They had assumed that their superior technology would be enough to subdue any planet they encountered. They had believed that taking one human child would be nothing more than a minor inconvenience. But they were wrong. And now, they would pay the price. As Marcus gathered his team and prepared to launch an all-out assault to retrieve his daughter, the Xarlar began to realize that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. The child they had taken was not a mere prize. She was the spark that would ignite a war unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The countdown had begun. The fate of Earth rested in the balance, and the Xarlar would soon learn the true cost of their mistake. The Xarlar fleet, having successfully taken Emily, believed that their task was complete. They had her, an innocent human child, and they were already preparing their experiments, eager to study her unique biology. The plan was simple: extract whatever data they could, learn from her, and then move on to the next world. But things weren't as simple as they thought. Inside the command ship, deep within the cold metallic halls, Emily sat in a sterile chamber, strapped to a medical table. She was confused, frightened, and crying. Her small face was streaked with tears. Her hands clutched the edges of the table in a desperate attempt to hold on to something familiar. The ship was silent, save for the low hum of its engines as it glided through space. Outside, the stars glittered, but Emily wasn't looking at them. She was too scared, her mind racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. How had she gone from playing in her yard to being trapped in this cold, unfamiliar place? The Xarlar had no idea what they were dealing with. They saw Emily as nothing more than a specimen, someone to be dissected and examined. They never understood the deeper connection humans had to one another, to their families, and to their survival instincts. They assumed their technology and methods would easily overpower her fear and resistance. But Emily's fear was not the thing that the Xarlar needed to worry about. It was something much more dangerous. Back on Earth, Marcus, Emily's father, was already planning his next steps. He had been part of the Human Special Forces, a secret branch that had prepared for this very moment. He had spent years learning everything about the Xarlar, studying their methods, their technology, and their weaknesses. But more importantly, he had learned how to track them, how to predict their movements, and how to fight them. His training and experience would be crucial in the coming battle. Within minutes of Emily's abduction, Marcus had called in his team. They moved with precision, each member operating in silence, ready to follow the carefully laid-out plans they had prepared for such an event. Their mission was clear: find the Xarlar ship, retrieve Emily, and eliminate the threat that the aliens posed to Earth. Marcus stood before a large holographic map, his eyes scanning the data as it flickered before him. The Xarlar ship had already jumped into warp space, but Marcus knew the exact trajectory. The Xarlar ships always followed a specific route when traveling across the galaxy, and Marcus had studied their every move. "We don't have much time," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. He turned to his team, each member of the elite squad standing at attention. "Prepare for immediate extraction. We'll need to intercept them before they reach their destination. We move fast, and we move quiet." The team nodded, each member going to their assigned tasks without a word. They were used to operating in the shadows, hidden from the public eye. They were humanity's unseen protectors, a force so secret that even the highest governments weren't aware of their existence. But they were about to step out of the shadows and into an open war against an alien race that had underestimated them. Back aboard the Tarler ship, things were not going as smoothly as they had anticipated. Emily's cries echoed down the long corridors as the aliens attempted to calm her. They injected her with a strange sedative, hoping to put her into a deep sleep while they conducted their experiments. But Emily's resistance, though weak, was not something they had prepared for. For all their technology, they had overlooked one critical detail. Humans were fighters. When pushed, they would do whatever it took to survive. Emily's fear was a part of that survival instinct, and although she was small, she was not helpless. Meanwhile, the Tarler scientists on board the ship continued their research, oblivious to the approaching danger. They assumed they had all the time in the world. They were wrong. "Commander, we have detected an anomaly," an officer said, breaking the silence. "An unidentified ship is approaching at high speed." "Impossible," Commander Zarkin growled, glaring at the officer. "No one can track us this far into space. Who dares challenge the Tarler?" "We don't know yet, Commander, but it is coming fast," the officer repeated. Zarkin gritted his teeth, sensing the change in the air. Something was off. The unease was palpable. His people had faced countless enemies, and they were always prepared. But this was different. A feeling of dread had begun to settle over the command ship, and Zarkin couldn't shake the thought that they were about to make a terrible mistake. Back on Earth, Marcus and his team had already launched their assault. They had intercepted the Tarler ship's warp trail and were now in pursuit, moving swiftly through space at the highest speed their crafts could manage. The team's ship, designed for stealth, glided silently through the galaxy, its advanced cloaking technology ensuring they were invisible to the enemy. They would catch the Tarler off guard, and they would strike hard. But as they drew closer to the Tarler ship, Marcus's gut twisted with a feeling he couldn't explain. His daughter was out there, somewhere, and he had no idea what the aliens were doing to her. The thought of it filled him with a cold, burning rage. His daughter had been taken, and he would do whatever it took to bring her home. "Prepare for boarding," Marcus ordered, his voice low and controlled. "We take them down fast and clean." The team worked in unison, moving with the precision of trained professionals. They donned their exosuits, armored and prepared for battle. Each member of the team knew the stakes, and they weren't about to fail. As the Tarler ship loomed ahead, the alien fleet was oblivious to the threat closing in on them. Inside, they continued with their experiments, unaware of the silent predator preparing to strike. The countdown had begun. Marcus's heart raced as they neared the alien ship. It was now or never. The fate of his daughter, and of Earth, was hanging in the balance. The tension inside Marcus's ship was palpable. Every member of his team was fully suited up, their faces hidden behind the dark visors of their helmets. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was the only sound as they glided silently toward the Tarler ship. Time was running out, and every passing second felt like an eternity. They were closing in, but Marcus couldn't shake the fear that his daughter might be in more danger than he could imagine. The ship's monitors lit up with readings, indicators of the Tarler ship's exact location. Marcus adjusted his helmet's visor, and his eyes scanned the data. The alien vessel was massive, a formidable warship that looked invincible, but Marcus knew better. He had studied their every weakness. There was a vulnerability in the Tarler ship's power grid, one that they had overlooked, and he planned to exploit it. "Stealth mode engaged," he muttered, As the team's ship cloaked itself in near invisibility, its advanced technology rendering it invisible to the enemy sensors, Marcus glanced at his team, his voice steady. "We move fast and silent. We breach, we retrieve Emily, and we get out. No mistakes." The squad members nodded in unison. They had been trained for this kind of mission. They were humanity's best chance at survival. They had been waiting for this moment, the moment when they would face off against the Carler, the moment when humanity's fate would be decided. As they approached the Carler ship, the sheer scale of it became even more intimidating. The warship loomed ahead, its dark surface reflecting the stars around it like a predator waiting in the shadows. But Marcus wasn't afraid. He knew that the Xarlor had no idea what was coming for them. Inside the alien ship, things were far from calm. The Xarlor had been too confident, too certain that their power would be enough to crush any resistance. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were about to feel the consequences. In the heart of the Xarlor vessel, Emily lay unconscious on a cold metal table. The aliens had injected her with a sedative, but the drug hadn't fully worked. Emily's body twitched, her breathing shallow as she fought against the unnatural sleep. Something deep inside her was awakening. The same survival instinct that had allowed humanity to thrive against the odds. She wasn't just a helpless child. She was a human, and humans were dangerous when cornered. Emily's fingers twitched. She groggily opened her eyes, her vision blurry. She tried to move, but her limbs felt heavy. Panic surged through her. Where was she? What had happened to her? Her eyes darted around the strange, metallic room. It was cold, sterile, and foreign. She could hear voices in the distance, the Xarlor talking amongst themselves, discussing their plans. Emily's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to escape. She had to get away. Suddenly, the door to the room opened, and a tall Xarlor scientist stepped inside, his long fingers holding a datapad. He was focused on the information on the screen and didn't notice Emily's eyes flicker toward him. Her breath hitched as she carefully and quietly maneuvered her hand toward the metal restraints on her wrists. They were tight, but not impossible to break. She was small, but she had strength in her. And in that moment, something inside her snapped into place. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't powerless. She was a human. As the Xarlor scientist approached, Emily's body tensed. With a sudden movement, she yanked at the restraints, using all the strength she had left. The metal bent and groaned as the restraints broke free. Her heart raced with adrenaline. She knew she had only moments before the aliens would realize she had escaped. She had to act quickly. The door was still open, and Emily bolted for it. She didn't know where she was going, but she couldn't stay there. She ran down the long, narrow corridor, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Her small body moved faster than her fear could catch up with her. She had no idea what she was going to face next, but one thing was certain: she wasn't going down without a fight. Meanwhile, Marcus's team had reached the Xarlor ship's outer perimeter. They were close, so close to retrieving Emily. Marcus gave the signal, and the team sprang into action, boarding the enemy ship with military precision. They moved silently through the halls, their weapons drawn, their minds focused. They had no room for error. The Xarlor were powerful, but humanity was more resourceful. They knew the Xarlor ship's layout inside and out. They had planned every move, every action, down to the smallest detail. Their goal was simple: retrieve the child, neutralize the threat, and leave the ship before the aliens even knew what hit them. But even with all their planning, there was one thing they hadn't counted on: Emily's escape. As Marcus and his team made their way deeper into the ship, they received a communication. The message was from one of their operatives, a soldier who had been scouting ahead. "Commander," the voice crackled over the comm. "The child. She's gone. She's escaped." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. This was not part of the plan. The whole operation was now in jeopardy. But he couldn't waste time. He had to find Emily, and fast. "Split up," he ordered. "Cover every corridor. We can't let the Xarlor find her first." As the team split off, Marcus felt the pressure mounting. Every moment was critical. The longer Emily was free, the more dangerous the situation became. He could only pray that she was okay and that they could find her before the Xarlor did. Meanwhile, Emily was running, her small legs carrying her through the maze of the alien ship. She had no idea where she was going, but she could feel something in the air, the pulse of danger, the hum of the ship's systems, the weight of something larger than herself closing in. She could hear the voices of the Xarlor getting closer, and her heart raced. But she wasn't alone. She wasn't helpless. She was a human, and humans didn't give up. The sounds of pursuit echoed through the narrow metallic corridors of the Xarlor ship. Emily's breath came in ragged gasps, her small feet pounding against the cold floor as she darted around corners and slipped through doorways, doing everything she could to evade the alien forces chasing her. Her heart pounded in her chest, and every part of her screamed to keep running, to keep moving. She had no idea where she was going, but she knew one thing: she had to escape. The Xarlor, despite their towering size and terrifying technology, were not prepared for a child to break free. They had thought of her as a specimen, a subject to be examined, a helpless creature that would cower in their hands. But Emily was different. She wasn't some weak, vulnerable being. She was human, and humans didn't run. They fought. Every time she heard the footfalls of the Xarlor getting closer, she felt a surge of panic, but she didn't stop. She was determined. She was terrified, yes, but her instincts were kicking in. Instincts that had been honed for centuries of survival on Earth. She had learned from the animals she had seen as a child, the predators of the planet who fought for survival. She was just as capable of fighting back. Turning a corner, she came across a small room, dimly lit, but it appeared to be empty. She darted inside, her mind racing, trying to think of what to do next. The ship's metal walls seemed to press in on her as she crouched low behind a stack of strange equipment. She couldn't let the Xarlor find her, but she couldn't keep running forever either. She needed a plan. Her eyes flicked to the blinking console beside her, and instinctively, she reached for it. The touchpad was cold, and her fingers fumbled with the strange controls, but something inside her knew that she had to try. The console lit up as her fingers tapped, producing a series of symbols she didn't understand. But some part of her recognized them, as if she had seen them before. A message popped up on the screen. Emergency lockdown. Override sequence initiated. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Had she just locked down the ship? She had no idea how or why, but she knew that the walls around her had suddenly shifted. The hum of the ship's systems seemed to intensify, and the doors began to slam shut, sealing off certain sections. It was only a temporary measure. She didn't know how long it would last, but it might just buy her the time she needed. The Xarlor outside the room started to shout in their guttural language, their voices rising in alarm as they realized what had happened. Emily's escape was becoming more difficult by the second. Her only hope now was that Marcus's team would reach her before the Xarlor could regain control. She had no idea where they were, but she trusted they would find her. She had to believe they would. Back outside the ship, Marcus and his team moved with the silent precision of ghosts, every member focused on one thing: finding Emily. They knew the clock was ticking. Every minute that passed meant a greater chance that the Xarlor would catch up to her first. "Stay sharp," Marcus muttered into his comm device. "They know we're here now. We don't have the element of surprise anymore." His team acknowledged the order, moving carefully through the alien vessel. Marcus's mind was racing. He could feel his daughter out there somewhere, just beyond reach. He was getting closer, but every turn seemed to lead him further away from where Emily might be. The layout of the Xarlor ship was confusing, its halls a labyrinth of sharp angles and unfamiliar architecture. The deeper they went, the more alien it felt. But Marcus knew one thing for sure: he wasn't leaving without her. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Xarlar ship, Commander Zarkin was seething with rage. He paced back and forth, his sharp, alien features twisted in anger. His ship had been compromised. The emergency lockdown had been triggered, and he knew that they were no longer in control. The intruders had breached their defenses, and the child, the one they had abducted so easily, was now a threat. Find her. Now, Zarkin barked to his officers. We cannot let this planet's pathetic creatures outsmart us. The human child is ours, and we will make them pay for this insult. The Xarlar forces began to scramble, desperately searching for Emily, trying to reset the ship's systems. But Emily was fast. She was smart. She had already anticipated their next move. The ship's alarms blared, and red lights flashed as the lockdown began to take effect. The corridors were now sealed off in multiple sections, creating a maze of metal walls. It would be harder for the Xarlar to find her now, but Emily knew she couldn't stay hidden for long. She had to keep moving. As she darted through another corridor, she heard voices again. Xarlar soldiers, their heavy footsteps growing nearer. They were close. Too close. She didn't have much time before they would find her again. Emily's mind raced for a solution, and then she remembered something. Her father had always told her that when she was scared or unsure, she should trust her instincts. And right now, those instincts were telling her to do one thing. Run. She dashed down a side hallway and into another chamber, one that looked similar to the control room she had seen earlier. There was a large panel, glowing softly in the corner of the room. Without thinking, she ran toward it, her fingers working frantically to input a sequence of commands she didn't fully understand. But somehow, something inside her urged her on. She needed to disable the ship's systems, or at least slow them down. As she worked the console, a door to the room suddenly slid open. Emily froze. She could see the silhouette of a Xarlar soldier standing in the doorway. His enormous figure blocked the light from the hallway, and his glowing eyes scanned the room. Emily's heart raced. She couldn't stay hidden. She had no choice. With a burst of adrenaline, she pressed the final key on the panel, and the room's lights flickered, causing the Xarlar to hesitate. In that moment of distraction, Emily bolted, running past the alien and diving into a side hallway. Her small legs moved faster than they ever had before. The Xarlar roared in anger, but it was too late. Emily was already disappearing into the labyrinth of the ship once more. Somewhere deep within the ship, Marcus's team heard the sounds of distant chaos. The alarms, the panicked voices of the Xarlar soldiers, the sudden shift in the ship's systems. They knew what it meant. Emily was still alive, and she was still fighting. Marcus smiled beneath his helmet, determination in his eyes. "We're getting closer," he said. "Hang on, Emily. We're coming." The Xarlar ship was in chaos, its once calculated movements now erratic as its systems malfunctioned. Red lights flashed throughout the halls, and the deep rumble of alarms echoed in every corner. But for Emily, it wasn't just the noise that filled her ears. It was the deafening sound of her heart pounding. The ship was now her enemy, and yet she was somehow using it against them. She was running, pushing forward, forcing her way through a maze of corridors as the Xarlar closed in. But she wasn't alone in this fight. Marcus and his team had found the traces she left behind. Her tiny footprints, the streaks of her hurried movements, and the signs of her defiance. They followed her, their training kicking in as they moved with precise coordination, knowing they had only moments before the Xarlar regained control of the ship. They had to find her. Now. Marcus's eyes scanned the corridors through his helmet's visor, his hand gripping his weapon tightly. His breath was steady, even though his mind was anything but calm. He could feel it, the same sense of urgency that had been building since he received the first sign that Emily was in danger. She was his daughter, and he was going to bring her home. "We're close," Marcus said into his comm, his voice low and purposeful. "Keep your eyes sharp." One by one, his team members nodded, splitting off to cover different angles. The ship was vast, and even though they had advanced weapons and the element of surprise on their side. The Tarlor were relentless. But the team wasn't worried about the aliens anymore. The real focus now was Emily, her survival, her safety, and the fact that they couldn't fail her. Meanwhile, Emily had run herself to the limit. Her small body was tired, and her legs were burning with exhaustion. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she rounded another corner, desperate to put more distance between herself and the Tarlor. Her mind raced with thoughts of what was to come, what would happen when they caught her, and how long it would take before they did. But she pushed those thoughts aside. She couldn't afford fear. Not now. She reached another door and slammed her hand against the panel. The door slid open, revealing a large chamber filled with strange technology. There were tubes, wires, and flashing screens. None of it made sense to her, but it didn't matter. She didn't need to understand it. What she needed was a way out, and fast. The sound of the Tarlor's heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, drawing closer. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She turned to face the room, her hands trembling as she searched for something. Anything that could give her an edge. Her eyes landed on a control panel near the center of the room, and she ran toward it. She didn't have time to second-guess herself. With trembling fingers, she began to tap at the controls, hoping she was doing something right. The panel flickered, a language she didn't understand flashing across the screen. But it didn't matter. She just kept pressing buttons, tapping randomly, praying she could somehow mess up the Tarlor systems again. The door slid open, and Emily froze. This time, she didn't turn and run. She stood there, defiant, staring at the alien who had entered. The Tarlor soldier wasn't just any soldier. It was the one she had seen earlier, the one who had tried to capture her. He was massive, towering over her with his glowing eyes fixed on her with malicious intent. But Emily didn't back down. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides, and though she was small, she stood as tall as she could. "Do you think you can escape, little one?" The Tarlor growled, his voice cold and metallic, sending a shiver down Emily's spine. She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand to the console again, pressing a series of buttons in rapid succession. The Tarlor charged toward her, but just as his hand reached out, the floor beneath them trembled. The ship groaned, and the lights flickered wildly. The Tarlor soldier stopped in his tracks, his eyes darting to the flickering systems around him. He looked confused for a split second, just long enough for Emily to make her move. In a flash, she sprinted toward the door, dodging the alien's massive hands as he reached out to grab her. With one last desperate move, she pushed herself harder, sprinting down another hallway, her eyes searching for any sign of Marcus. And there he was. Marcus's team had finally found her. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to slow. Marcus's heart soared as he saw his daughter, alive and breathing, standing before him. Though still running, still fighting. He moved toward her, his voice breaking through the chaos. "Emily," he shouted, a mixture of relief and anger in his tone. "We're getting you out of here." But the Tarlor weren't about to let them escape without a fight. The ship was alive with the sound of their pursuit, the steady hum of alien technology clashing with human willpower. Marcus raised his weapon, and his team positioned themselves for a fight, their eyes set with determination. "We need to hold them off," Marcus ordered. "Get Emily to safety." The team surged forward, weapons drawn, cutting through the hallway as they engaged the Tarlor soldiers. Their weapons were designed to take on the alien force with maximum efficiency, but even as the Tarlor fell, more seemed to take their place. The team moved as one unit, blocking every advance and providing cover for Marcus and Emily. Marcus reached out and grabbed his daughter's hand, pulling her toward the exit. "Stay close," he urged, his voice tight with worry. Emily nodded, but she didn't let go of her own fear. She could hear the Tarlor advancing again, their footsteps growing louder, their roars echoing through the ship. But she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The only thing that mattered now was getting out of there. They reached the ship's airlock just as the Tarlor came charging down the hallway. The doors slid open, and Marcus ushered Emily inside. As they boarded their ship, the last of the Xarlar soldiers fired their weapons, but it was too late. Marcus and his team had already sealed the airlock, and the human ship shot away from the Xarlar vessel with an explosion of energy. As they flew into the safety of deep space, Marcus finally let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He looked down at Emily, who was huddled against him, her eyes wide with exhaustion but filled with hope. They were safe, this time. But Marcus knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. Humanity had sent a message to the Xarlar, and it was one they wouldn't forget. And Emily, she wasn't just a child. She was humanity's future. And she had just proven that even in the face of an alien threat, humanity's will to survive was unmatched. The universe had just learned something it would never forget.